Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're going to go over the unofficial patch notes, or stuff which is in the files on the dev server but isn't necessarily on the dev server. Now, the first thing I want to say before we start this video, understand that the stuff which is written here, it isn't guaranteed to come into update 1.95, but a lot of it is looking likely to come into update 1.95. And I also want to thank Father Gentlespie for putting this list together, and of course doing the data mining for us. He is definitely an asset to the community, and I'll make sure to leave links in the description so you can go and either thank him or look at some of the other work that he's done. Also, on top of this is just a general thing. In Operation Frost, which is obviously the festive event for this year, they have changed two vehicles. They've actually changed the armament on the J6, and they've also changed the armament on the Soviet heavy fighter. Now, or the Interceptor, I should say. I'm going to go over the vehicles in a later video today, so just watch out for that one. Another thing, just before we get on, a few people have said that they're worried about my health when it comes to making the amount of videos that I do. Don't worry about it. Overall, I'm completely fine, and you're pretty much just having a little bit of a view into the other side of my life. If you didn't know, on top of all this YouTube stuff, I also have a full-time job. So, you know, I work 40 hours a week, and hopefully this shows you the amount of commitment and drive that I have to work that I do. So, therefore, you know, a lot of people saying, how are you producing this much? Are you okay? Is this, you know, unhealthy and stuff? I know where my limits are. I have been pushing them for 6 years, and I've gone over them in that 6-year period. So don't worry about me. Just enjoy the content. I'm not going to die. You know, nothing silly like that. So just enjoy the stuff, and I'll worry about me. So let's get into this unofficial patch notes. There is a bunch of vehicles, which we're going to show in the assets viewer, whether it be Swedish, helicopters, or even some ships, and also some changes to the general game. So the first one is lots of changes to the maximum repair time for various vehicles. So probably meaning that they are going to either change them in-game or in the hangar. So either pushing people towards the idea of using their SL, or just making it so crew skills matter a little bit more. They added new antenna DMs, so my guess is you'll be able to knock out stuff like radar. They added 2 new bullet decals, which is kind of cool as well, and they added a new FX type. Now this is the sparks, as Gentlespie says, probably the sparks with the physics. So yeah, if you haven't seen in War Thunder now, when you hit something, whether it's a plane, you know, whether it's a ship or a tank, sparks fly off. And also a lot of guns, when you fire them, also have sparks coming out of them. It looks absolutely beautiful when you set off like an ammunition explosion. It is really nice to see. So it's a lovely addition to the game. Probably one of the best ones, since it affects pretty much every vehicle in the game in update 1.95. They changed the number of bullet decals from 16 to 35. And also, they've added some new game parameters. So, SACLOS missile line of sight, missile tree dead zone, and missile trees transparency threshold or threshold. Now, for me, when I think about this, this is probably just changing how missiles interact with the environment around them. It is still a little bit dodgy, especially when it comes to radar and missiles, how they are able to kind of curve over certain parts of the map, you know, around hills and so on and so forth. And the thing is, this has been getting better over this year, but it still isn't fully there yet, so this might be just an addition to try and help that. Also, there's some new loading screens, which is lovely, and some change to max audio channels, so how many sounds can play at once. You're now up to 128 from 96, so hopefully that means that there is less clipping of a lot of the sound assets, where it cuts certain ones off, because at least in my experience, especially when we do a lot of the custom battles, what ends up happening is you have this situation where a bunch of planes will go past you at once, and it will clip all of the audio, and you know, certain sounds will cut off others because there just isn't enough space. So my hope is that that is now fixed. Then there's some added new sights for the AH-64A, the AH Mark I, the AH-64A P10 or P10 and the AH-64D. Now understand, we're going to be going through those vehicles. They also have cockpits as well, which is really nice. The added new armor classes, so they've added the new armor class 22 and armor class 44. They've added more penetration distance shells from 3.5 kilometers to 9 kilometers and from 15 kilometers to 30 kilometers, and new weather type as well on the naval open sea. My guess is that is for stuff like enduring confrontation in naval, to see how that goes. Now let's have a look at some of the new flight models. So the ones which are not on the dev server, and remember the dev server is off right now, so the ones which aren't there are all of these Apaches, so the AH-64s. Then we have two variants of the MiG-21, the Étendard, and then also some Swedish vehicles and a few ships as well. So we'll go through them one at a time just to try and show you these vehicles. The first one we're going to have a look at is the Apaches. So this one is the AH-64A. This is an American Apache, and you can see that it has access to the chain gun at the bottom. It also has access to what seems to be Hellfires. On top of this as well, this Apache, which you see in front of you, does have access to Stingers and also the 30mm chain gun. It can carry 16 Hellfires on the the outer things, and also rockets that you can see, but it looks like in order to take Stingers, which is this mounting here, you will have to lose some Hellfires in order to take it. So therefore, you're going to have a situation where you're going to have to choose, do you want to be able to defend yourself in an air-to-air way along with the chain gun, or are you going to have to, be able to take the, all the Hellfires to, have fun? I don't think there are any toes on this machine, just Hellfires, and these are the cockpits right now. They're not, in amazing condition, but they're in good enough condition to show off. So here you go. You can see all of the dials and also some of the interesting little areas which you're going to have in this Apache. So this is in the American tech tree right now as a vehicle. And the next one we're going to have a look at is the AH-64D. Now the AH-64D, this is the A variant, this is the D. So you can see the D variant is slightly different. It has access to these areas here on the sides, which actually correspond to having some interesting things. This basically means that you can take the Hellfires alongside of the Stingers, and also some form of automatic chaff system as well, which was available on the AH-64D. Something we saw actually demonstrated with the Mi-28 when it came to the dev server, and my guess is when this gets into the game, if it does get into the game, in this update, it will also have it. It also has the longbow radar, which you can see right here, or at least that's the notable part, which make it really obvious to know that it does have the longbow radar, and also it has a glass cockpit. So that means that you'll be able to see inside these screens and see what is going on them in the Apache. So the main difference between this one in game and the AH-64A that we just saw is the radar, and also the fact that you can bring the Stingers alongside the 16 Hellfires. At least when you look at the armaments, that is how it is set up here. You can see this is the Stingers on the edge of the machine right there, and there is, for rockets, and also for the Hellfires. Understand that when we have a look at stuff in the asset viewer, what I do is I pile all of the weaponry on top of each other, so you can get a general idea of what it will all look like, or all of the armament options which are available for these machines. So this is also in the American tree. And what is kind of interesting is it's actually labeled as the AH-64D US, and there is another machine as well, which is actually a British Apache. So this machine, which you can see slight differences, we'll actually just do a double take here just so you can see the difference. So this is the D variant, so the American variant, and this is the Mark 1, which is the British variant. You can see very slight changes between them when it comes to what is available to them. And basically, you have different rockets, or at least different rocket pods. You still have access to all of the Hellfires. The difference when it comes to these machines is you don't get access to Stingers on this machine, the British Apache version. Instead, what you get access to is Starstreaks. Now, Starstreaks are laser-guided missiles, of course, air-to-air missiles, and we actually have them in game on the Stormer HVM. So though these are the air-to-air versions, which will be able to just lock on and fire, and also it has access, of course, to the longbow radar, which you can see on the top there. It also has access to chaff, but there is no Stingers, as I said, and also no brimstone missiles, which is really, really sad. I was hoping that we would get some brimstones with this. There are some videos out there of British Apaches being tested with brimstones, but maybe at some point in the future, we will get to see them. Unfortunately, right now, that isn't the case. It still holds the same chain gun as the other two, the wonderful, 30mm, and also should have the same engines as the D variant. It's very similar to it, just different air-to-air components, and also maybe a little bit of defensive features, which will, change it also. Back to, after having a look at these Apaches, oh no, we have one more. We actually have the Patan. Now, the Patan on the asset viewer isn't here, but what is here is something else. You can actually find the Patan, technically, in the form of a camouflage. So this is the camouflage for the Patan, and what the Patan is an Israeli version of the AH-64A. And at least from the file point of view, it is a separate vehicle. This has led to people believing that this will be the premium for the Americans, which I definitely think is, is a good shout. And for me, the fact that it only is represented in a camouflage on the asset viewer shows to me that it will be exactly the same as the AH-64A that we've seen before. So this probably will be the premium one. It has a pretty cool Israeli desert camouflage on it, and yes, the Patan is, was used by the Israelis. The Israelis also use the H-64D, but it has a different name beginning with S. I can't remember it right now, but yeah, that is something to look forward to. So there are 4 Apaches in the files, and this is not even including the YAH, which was the one that was leaked a while back. So there is, there's 4 in the files right now because of update 1.95. There is also, a 5th one, which we know exists. It just isn't in the files, which is kind of funny. So the next one, after having a look at all of these H's, we have the Attendard. Now, this is a plane which is in the French side of things. If I can just find it really quickly for you. And it is a naval aircraft, a naval jet made for the French. There we go. So if we just bring it up on screen just to show you. Here we go. So it is, in my opinion, quite an ugly plane. It's definitely not a looker, but you can see on the side here, it does say that it is a marine vehicle with, of course, the French insignia or the French decal or the French roundel with the anchor in it. So being a naval aircraft, I'll just tell you a little bit about this machine. So the Étendard, as it's known, or the Dassault Étendard 4, is a transonic carrier-borne strike fighter aircraft. It was introduced into French service in the 1960s and was actually retired in 2000, after being, upgraded a bunch of times. So this is not a supersonic aircraft that will be available for France. This instead is a vehicle which will be transonic with a maximum speed of around about 1,099 kilometers an hour. And what it has access to for weaponry is kind of nice. So it gets access to 2 30mm DEFers, which you can find right here underneath the vehicle itself, kind of halfway down. And then it also gets access to 2 Matra rocket pods with 18 SNEB 68mm and also AIM-9 Sidewinders, and also Magic air-to-air missiles and Nords, so the AA Nords and also the AS Nords, very similar to the ones which we have on other French vehicles. If you have a look at these fixtures, what you can see is it does have access to, points where it could definitely carry something like the Nords or maybe even Sidewinders, but you can see the rockets and also, you know, the areas to carry that stuff. So it should be a pretty fun aircraft, and overall it is a naval-borne aircraft, so it will have some reduced capabilities compared to some of its friends around, you know, the BRs, but it just shows that the French have not been forgotten. I have definitely heard a lot from, you know, the guys who want the Mirage, and I understand that in the future the Mirage is coming. It isn't coming in update 1.95, and I know that disappointed a lot of people, but hopefully this Étendard 4 will make it, so therefore, you know, at least you guys get something around the vehicle itself, and I think that, you know, would be cool. It's an indigenous design, this is fully French, so that is something to look forward to. The next set of vehicles which we can also have a look at is the MiG-21s. So there are two MiG-21s in the files, which are new. We obviously have the standard MiG-21, we have the standard, oh by the way, the cockpit isn't fully done yet, as you can see. It's in a pretty nice condition, but I don't think it's, you know, completely done, especially when looking at the seat. But the machine itself is a really beautiful machine. But talking about the MiG-21s, if we have a look, this is the F-13, so this is the one which is already in the Soviet tech tree. You know, it was added alongside the Phantom in, I think, 191, if I remember correctly, but, you know, don't quote me on that, I can't exactly remember, everything's a bit of a blur right now, but there were two added to the files. One of them is a MiG-21MF, which is German, and then you have a MiG-21 SMT, which is Russian. Now, in the asset viewer, there is only one of these available right now, and it's definitely not in a completed state. I'm going to put that out there. So this is, as I said, the Soviet one, which is already in the game, the F-13. This is the MF. You can see the difference in quality when it comes to the model of the MF to the F-13, but at least it shows that there is something here for us to grasp onto, something which eventually will come, whether it's in this update or whether this is in another one. Now, you can see the main difference is this fuselage area, which is raised. It also has access to what looks like just a weird gun right here, which, you know, eventually will have to get modeled properly. And there's also nothing on the inside of this, so this is just a shell right now of something which may come in the future. So if we look at the 195 stuff in the files, you know, this one is in the worst state. This one is definitely nowhere near HD. It's definitely nowhere near done, but it is there. Now, as I said, this is the MiG-21MF. What is the MiG-21MF, I hear you ask across the room? It is the modernized, uprated version, which means it has a better engine. It was an export version of the MiG-21SM. It had the RP-22 radar with an R-13-300 turbojets. The choice of weapon loads was increased with the addition of the R-60 and later the R-60M IR-seeking AAM. These were also licensed built by India by HAL as the Type 88. So the Germans are getting a pretty powerful MiG-21. It should have a better engine than the one which is in the tech tree, and or in the Soviet tech tree, I should say, and also access to really good air-to-air missiles. So what is the SMT? Because, of course, you know, the Soviets also have to get something as well. The SMT is known as the Fishbed K by NATO, and the S is referring to the Sapphire 21 RP-22 radar, so the same as on the MF, and then you have the modernized version, which the M stands for, and then you have T, which stands for fuel, referring to increased fuel capacity. So this version has a better radar, has increased fuel capacity, and also is more modernized. And it's really easily spotted because it has a larger spine, which is very similar to the one that you see in front of you. But remember, what we're looking at here is the MF. We are not looking at the SMT. So yeah, there's two MiG-21s just sat there. They're not fully done, but they are getting there. There is also a bunch of Swedish vehicles which are sat in the files, which is, you know, lovely to see as well. The fact is, when it comes to Sweden's aircraft, I just need to find it right now. Let's see. Sometimes the asset viewer can be a little bit finicky, especially if it decides to break on me, but that's okay. We can sort that out really quick. So we're looking for that. Okay, there we go. So first of all, this is the Saab B3. Now, the Saab B3C. This one was on the dev server. It is the first bomber that you have access to in the Swedish tech tree. But there is another one, and it is, in fact, the Saab B3. You can see the difference between the two models is pretty much the engines. You can see right there, and also what seems to be a very dodgy turret on the back of this thing. Now, in my preliminary research for this aircraft, it seems like the B3, or at least the B3A, which I'm guessing is the same as this is just a straight up exported version of the Ju-86K4. It was delivered by Germany to Sweden, and then, you know, Sweden decided to start license production and create later variants such as the B3C, which had upgraded engines in the form of British engines, license-built British engines. So the B3 here is pretty much a Ju-86K4 at the end of the day. And what that means is it has access to slightly weaker engines. It also has the same front. The only real difference is whatever the hell this thing is on the back. So on the back here, what we have is what can only be described as a really, really weird gun. I don't know what this is. I don't think this is a 13.2mm. It just seems too big for it. Maybe a 20mm. I don't know whether both of them are connected or if, you know, it is just a single gun which hasn't been, you know, taken off from the B3C. Because if you compare it to the B3C, this is the B3C, right? So you've got this, you know, the 8mm gun from the Swedish, or it might even be the 7.92 from the Germans, and this is the B3. So it just has a much larger turret on the back, also with a casing for the, of course, gunner. So yeah, the two major differences for the B3C are the engines and also the guns. The one turret on the back. Everything else seems exactly the same. The next vehicle that is on offer is the J21. Now, this is a very interesting machine. If we can just find it once again, just want to make sure to have everything sorted for me, just to make everything that little bit easier. And of course, everything is going to get harder, isn't it? Yes, this is how it always works when it comes to this, sorting everything out. Right, let's just do this instead. There we go. So this, as you can see, is the J21. Now, if you don't know what the J21 is, it's a wonderful aircraft, and there was a few variants of the J21 built. This is the A1 variant, and what that means is it is powered by a really interesting power plant. A short history of the J21. So Sweden wished to ensure its continued neutrality through a policy of arms strength during World War II, but was effectively denied access to foreign weapons. So in response to this, Sweden undertook an indigenous rearmament program which included an advanced fighter. The Saab 21 was ultimately produced to be this indigenous advanced fighter. What it had access to, at least the A1 variant, it had access to the DB605B 12-cylinder engine, so that ran at 1,475 horsepower, which is, of course, the German engine, the Daimler-Benz engine, and also the armament is kind of funky as well. It has one 20mm in the nose, and also it has four 13.2mm, two in the nose and two in the wings. So you can see here you have the 20 in the nose right there, and then lower than it you have the two 13.2s in the holes right here. Then you got a 13.2 here, and then also a 13.2 here. Also, this looks very similar to the Narval, which is, I would say, is actually a pretty fun, little aircraft. Of course, this is a low-wing monoplane, and being powered by the DB605B, they made a bunch of different variants. The J21A-1 was actually delivered December 1945. So this is technically a post-war vehicle, if you want to see it like that. But, it generally isn't, I wouldn't class it as a post-World War II vehicle because it first flew, at least the three J21 prototypes, first flew in 1943. So the design is very much of World War II nature. The other things is that they did make different ones. So you have the J21A-2, this had a revised armament, and the J21A-3 were fighter bombers. They also made some jet versions of these machines, using the de Havilland Goblin 2 turbojets, creating the J21RA, and also a license-built version of the same engine, which powered the J21RB. So wouldn't that be cool? You have this Saab J21, but it is powered by a jet engine instead of this DB605 that we see before us. But it would have been really nice to test this on the dev server. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. It just wasn't there. I don't know what else to say. It just wasn't available to us, unfortunately. Moving on, there are some other Swedish vehicles as well, which were not there either. And they come in the form of some ground attackers, the T-18s. So let's just sort this out as well. Two versions. You've got the T-18B1. Now, these seem very similar to the B-18s, which were in the tech tree. The B-18A, which is this. There we go. This version right here, the kind of pseudo bomber / dive bomber idea. And then you had the B-18B, which was the one which looked really fun. Upgraded engines, could hold rockets underneath the central cockpit. It also has the asymmetrical cockpit and the 13.2mm going forward. But the T variants of these seem to be some form of more ground attackers than the B variants, which are more bombers. You can see here on the B1, it has access to what is either two 13.2mm, because it looks very similar to the gun which you find in the turret back here, which is a 13.2mm, or it's two 20mm. I'm not exactly sure what this was armed with, apart from the fact that I can find armaments for the B2 variant. I just can't find armaments for the B1. The B variant also ended up receiving an armament of a 13mm machine gun and two 20mm and a 57mm Bofors, and also air-to-surface rockets and also some other stuff as well. But the problem is, right, so this is the T1 version. So my guess is it has the 20s, but it could also have just the extra 13.2s in the bottom of the nose. The B2 goes a little bit janky. So you can see they added, as talked about, a 57mm. Now, since this is a ground attack 57mm, I'm hoping that it does get access to AP, but I don't know. It's as simple as that. I don't understand if it has access to AP or HE. No matter what happens, it's either going to be a really fun heavy fighter to try and kill planes with, or it's going to be a vehicle which is going to be pretty fun in trying to deal some damage in other areas. So, in the ground forces point, ground realistic coming in with the 57, very similar to the BF-110 with the 30mm. I'm going to have a lot of fun with it, and I hope you do too. do. That actually finishes us off for the Swedish vehicles that are just sat, in the files. So we have the Saab B3, which is a weaker version of the B3C. We got the J21A, which is a really cool aircraft, and 2 ground attackers in the forms of the 18Bs, just T variants. And now we have 2 other vehicles, and one of them I will be looking at later today. I just wanted to kind of mention it because it just got changed recently, and also I didn't cover it on the dev server because I couldn't find it. This is the Tisma. So this is the festive event vehicle which is coming for this year. You can see the insanity when it comes to its armament. 2 large guns in the nose. It also has these large guns in the wing roots, and also it seems to have some kind of jousting stick in the front of it. But the reason why it has this jousting stick is because it is connected to some radar. So this machine should have radar. I don't know whether it is like ground looking radar, but it is supposed to be an interceptor. So my guess is it should have proper job radar for hunting down aircraft. Doesn't that sound really, really fun? It definitely sounds fun to me. The next vehicle is also one which wasn't shown. This is a ship, and this is another porter. So one thing is we saw this porter on the dev server. It's the 1941 version. It has access to quite a lot of large guns. It has 8 of them overall, also the Chicago typewriters, and some 20s in the center of the machine. So this was a machine that was sat at 4.3 for the US, and overall I'm looking forward to it because it has really good reload on its main guns. It should do really, really well. Now, there's another version of the Porter sat in the files now, and it is the 1944 version. It is, as you can see, darker, meaner. Does have slightly less turrets, though. So it only has 5 main guns on it, but its AA armament is through the damn roof. So it's got rid of some of its main guns, but it's added some of these boys. So what we can see here is 40mm guns, designed to just put a lot of holes in pretty much everything. It also has 20mm up the wazoo over all of this machine, and also keeps the torpedoes, which is lovely. And there's some more 20mm and the torpedoes, more 40s in the back, just chilling, plus the extra turrets. So you lose some of your main firepower, which is there in the 1940, you can see right here, and also on the front, and you replace the typewriters with 40mm. This thing is scary. It is incredibly scary, and you can even see the x-ray of it when it comes to the guns which are available, and also the engines. Nothing else seems to change apart from the general armament on the machine. But it does lose a lot of main guns, like it loses, so it loses overall 3 of its main guns, and gains 8 40mm. So hopefully that makes it in time for 1.95. If it does, I would be happy to see it. If, it doesn't make it, then, c'est la vie. Hopefully it will come in the future or be used as some kind of gift vehicle. I suppose the top also changes as well. It goes from just a general mast to what looks like some form of maybe radar or weapons guiding system. We're going to have a look. But that's the new vehicles that are in the files, or at least sat here in the files, alongside everything else. And you can see there's a lot of them that just weren't there on the dev server. And the question is, that everybody has, including myself, is, are these going to be added in 1.95? A lot of these seem to be fully built. The Apaches are just ready to go, it seems. And then you've got that Porter, and then also all of those Swedish vehicles. If they're not in the tree on the release, that will be very sad, because they all just seem like great vehicles in order to bring into the game. Maybe the Porter will be a squadron vehicle, who knows. So the other things as well, there was lots of changes to the A129 flight model, and also most helis have some FM changes. The F-84Bs and the F-84B and the F-84G, the landing gear brakes have been changes. The G5 and the G8, so the large Japanese bombers, they have an extra crew member now. The Halifax engines have finally been changed to radials, because that's what they are. The A2 on the 162, the wingspan has been increased. That's kind of an odd one. I-16s have changed. Hopefully that means the Chinese ones will be fixed. There was problems with the flaps and also the gears on the I-16s for the Chinese. The J8M1, the fuel consumption increased on full weapon throttle. And the mass has also been lowered, but the fuel mass has increased. So that means that as you burn more fuel, you will get lighter. The key 10s are being changed. The I-301 has also been changed. And the P51ATL and the P51Bs have changed. The PBM3 has also been changed. So a lot of event vehicles are getting changed. The very slight changes to the J21D, and here we have, you know, the new ships. All of these, you know, if you want to have a look at these, the only one, as I said, which wasn't on the dev server was this one. Oh, and also, I suppose I could show you this. So the this is the event vehicle that is coming in the festive events. I mean, while I'm here, you know, while I remember, I'll just, you know, show you guys. Just if you don't watch the other video later on. So it is the PT811. There we go. So first of all, we already have one of the PTs in game. This is the PT810, which is sat in the American tech tree. Now this is the PT811. You can see it is very similar to it. It actually has exactly the same armament in it, just in a slightly different configuration. The 811 has 4 torpedoes, which, you know, are mounted here. You just can't see them on this model. It also has access to the 2 40mm Bofors, front and back, a dual 20mm here, a secondary 20mm dual there, and then also the 81mm mortar. Then, if you have a look at the 810, it is exactly the same, apart from the 20mm are mounted. This one is raised a little bit. This one is in a slightly different place. And also the mortar is mounted on the different side of the vehicle. The other thing as well is, if I can just find the right one, this is the char, which is the animation pack for the 810. So you can see the little thing at the top squiggling around. And then the 811 also has this movement, but you can see it is slightly different. So yeah, I think it looks really cool. It's a fun little boat, and I'm just happy to see it. Anyway, moving back to the notes as well. The other thing is we had a look at all the new tanks. There is no hidden tanks apart from this Macabre. The Macabre is obviously the festive vehicle. We'll have a look at it later. There are some new bombs as well, which are the Swedish bombs, which have been added to the files. There are also a bunch of new tank cannons, and a lot of these are just the cannons which you will find, you know, on the new vehicles. The fact that you have the 105L74, that's the STRV's gun, the M68 TTS, that's the M60A3 TTS's gun. Then you have stuff like the 57mm automatic cannon. These are just a lot of the Swedish guns, and also a bunch of other guns such as the 90mm Defa, which is the gun on the new AML 90 for the French. There's also a lot of ship cannons, too many to even list. So the amount of new cannons surpasses the current number of cannons already in the game. If that doesn't tell you that Gaijin is committed to these larger ships and more guns and more cannons, then, you know, I don't know what else will. That is just insane. The fact that in one single update, they have added more cannons to the files than were there previously. So they've added double the amount of cannons plus some to this update. How insane is that? That's awesome. Also, the Shafrir got changed. So the anti-air missile, the Shafrir, has been overperforming for an incredibly long time. The end mass is increased to 45 from 15, but the air-to-air missile has been decreased on range to 5 kilometers instead of 10. The R13M has been buffed. Max speed is increased to 2.4, so you're going to have to get used to those missiles being faster coming at you. Also, the 145 and 150 Swedish rockets have been changed. I'm going to have to test them out to see the changes. And also, some new rockets were added, a US Starstreak. Now, this is, as we said before with the Apache, the AH-64. This is the one which, was we were talking about. The fact that it isn't technically a US Starstreak. What it is instead is it is a... oh, wait, can I find this? Where are you at? It isn't a US Starstreak. Instead, what it is it is a US helicopter in the form of the Apache, which has the British Starstreak on it and is probably going to be destined to the British tree. So that is what is talking about there. So I wouldn't get, too confused, and also don't worry too much, American players. You'll keep your stingers. You don't have to worry about it. Also, the Hellfires have been changed again. It seems like every time we have, Hellfires or an update, the Hellfires get massively changed. The 30mm 2A42 APCR is switched to APDS, so that's actually quite a large buff for it. Pretty much every single plane weapon has some changes to it, with the 120mm on the GS, which I believe is the Italian top tier gun on the Ariete, if I remember correctly. They've increased the penetration again for the F1, so the APFSDS, by around about 50. And then the G1, the penetration is decreased from 488 to 394, which is, quite significant actually for those separate rounds. So you can see that there is a lot of stuff that right now for update 1.95 is sat in the files, but it isn't available on, or wasn't, sorry, available on the dev server. This to me either indicates we're going to have a second dev server to have a look at these stuff, or we're going to be in a situation like we were last time, where a lot of this stuff is just going to be sat in the files and will be released on updates 1.95 or later updates, but we won't be able to test them first. I really hope that we do get to test these vehicles, especially stuff like the Apaches. I know a lot of people are very much interested in the Apaches, and also those Swedish vehicles as well. I want to give an accurate representation of what the Swedish is going to be like for people, and you can't really do that if you don't have access to the vehicles themselves. You kind of just have to hope that when they come to the game, they're going to be in good nick. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this video, and as I said before, thank you to Father Gentlespie for putting the list together, and I hope you have enjoyed all of the dev server content. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, Jay Wilt, John Ryman, Joseph Anders, Martinez, Moxie, Super Cacti, Uyans Terry, E-Love Goat, and Seductive Trashcan for supporting the channel.